Writing samples are extremely important, especially for litigation-related jobs, because a law firm will look at those and it will analyze how well you write, and litigation is about writing. So they'll either get a job or not get a job based on the quality of your writing sample. It's not as important as your resume in a lot of respects, but it's very, very important. Writing samples need to be given a lot of attention. If you want to give yourself the best chance of getting a job, you really need to take the time to ensure that your writing sample is as good as it can be. One of the things that, the reasons that things like law review and so forth are important for someone to have on your resume is because when you're on law review, basically what you're doing, if you're an editor, is you're proofreading stuff very, very carefully and making sure things are as perfect as they can be. So the mindset needed to be a good litigator and a good attorney is the ability to proofread things. And so you need to be able to proofread and make sure that there's as few errors as possible on what you're doing. Most of what you're writing when you're in law school or out of law school is based on deadlines. You're writing something to get a paper turned in on time, or you're writing a brief to get the brief done in time. So a lot of times mistakes are made. So you just need to be checking for typos. You need to make sure that there's no spaces that shouldn't be there, periods that shouldn't be there. You need to make sure your blue booking's perfect. You need to make sure your citations and parentheticals are substantive. Your font is the same size and style. All these little things that a lot of times people think are dumb are actually the whole legal mindset on what's important. And even if you review something once, you should review it again and again and again, just to make sure that things are good. And one thing I would say too that is very important is always to send writing samples as a PDF, because people are going to be opening these documents in different ways, and that could actually create errors. So always do things as a PDF. I don't believe that in most cases that corporate attorneys need writing samples, but they should always have transaction sheets. And a transaction sheet does not have to have the persuasive writing component, but they're important because they reflect your attention to detail and how seriously you take kind of your work as a corporate attorney. Corporate attorneys are always better off putting together transaction sheets, because what it shows the firm is it shows the firm that the person takes a lot of pride in the different types of work they've done, that they've worked on different sort of transactions. And a lot of times the firms will use the attorney's transaction sheet when they're going out and pitching clients. So it's very important for corporate attorneys to have transaction sheets. Writing samples should typically be 8 to 20 pages. This is enough for the law firm to judge your writing ability and to get a sense of how you handle details and other things. A persuasive writing sample filled with arguments and so forth could be less than 8 pages sometimes, but not very often. And if the employer has a page limit, always defer to that. An attorney writing sample should always contain a written introduction, just so that people understand the context of what's being written about. It's typically just like 1 page, and then if any information has been redacted, then you should always note that too. You should always check your local rules and relevant statutes about what's considered confidential and privileged. You can also ask the local bar association's confidential ethics advisor what they think. You certainly don't want to include any confidential or privileged information. In most cases, if a document has been filed with a court and it's not filed under seal or pursuant to a protective order, then it's always fine for the most part to provide a writing sample. Anything that's a public record, you can always provide. Some people may change the name of the company to Acme or something, or someone's name, they may change the name. You can also use a highlighting tool to cover up the information in black. Those are some things you can do. One thing I would recommend though, it doesn't look great to have to cover up all this information and kind of hide. It makes it more difficult to read. You might as well provide a writing sample where you don't have to take out things and so forth. It just seems kind of weird. And also, I would recommend against using a black magic marker to redact information. I wouldn't recommend using an article that you wrote with someone else. Someone's not going to really get a good sense of your writing sample if you do that. Ideally, any attorney or law student should have an article that they wrote with another person. If you did write the article with someone else, or you did write the brief with someone else, you can certainly note that to the attorneys that you're submitting it to. Sometimes if you're an attorney that submitted a brief to a court, a more senior attorney may have signed it and you may have done all the work. If that's the case, just note that in the cover letter to your writing sample. Most employers are going to be interested in your ability to write compelling arguments and to argue. At the same time, the facts do show a certain ability to process information and put those into a brief. In most cases, the employers are not going to be interested in the facts section. They're going to be much more interested in the persuasive sections of the brief, if you have a page limit. There's nothing wrong with providing a letter to an employer, provided it doesn't contain confidential information. And I've certainly received feedback from firms saying they were very impressed with real-world writing samples. Ideally, if you've been an attorney for several years, for example, you're a fourth-year associate, providing a paper that you wrote in law school would show your writing abilities from several years ago, and presumably your writing would have improved in those 4 years. So you should try to use something as relevant and recent as possible. Every recruiter that I've ever spoken to, and I remember sending an email around once about that, has always said proofread. And the thing is that an employer, just if they see like 1 or 2 small errors in your writing sample, is going to be very upset by that and not like it. And the reason is because when you're turning in work on behalf of a client, the client doesn't always know how to judge your analytical ability and so forth, but they do notice typos. And so they'll assume if there's a typo in your work that the other work was not of good quality. So preparing a writing sample is very hard work, but at the same time, if you want to maximize your chance of getting the job, you should put all the time you can into proofreading. And in addition to proofreading, I would also recommend just to take out superfluous language. Employers are impressed by your ability to write clearly and your ability to fit a lot of information into short sentences and short paragraphs, because if you can, then you have the ability to put more things in if you're very succinct with your language.